The producer. The producer. Oh, the producer. All right. So I want to talk about, dang it, I do the so thing every time. I'm trying so hard not to do that. So hard. I'm such a valley girl. I came here to talk about Cavazos today. I was reading or watching or doing something. There's some kind of media involved. And a very, very, very well-known, very famous practitioner of the art of horsemanship was talking about Cavazos. And what he was saying, it was actually so far out of the realm of practicality that I don't exactly even remember what I was saying or what he was saying. And he was against Cavazos, but I can't necessarily tell you why. He was kind of talking in circles around why he was against Cavazos. But it doesn't matter. So Cavazos, for anybody that's unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, some people call it a mouth shutter. There's a whole variety of things you can call it. But it's basically a strap, a rope, piece of leather, whatever, that goes around the horse's muzzle to keep their mouth shut, is the way it appears. And that's why in Western riding, most people call it a mouth shutter, or at least a lot of people I've been around call it a mouth shutter. So what's really going on with the Cavazos? First of all, let's go back. Let's talk about a handful of other things. Cavazos means different things depending on where you're at. In Spain and in Portugal, they train their young horses with a Cavazos. In Portugal, a Portuguese Cavazos is usually a big, wide, soft nose band that goes around the muzzle and has a series of rings on it, on the top, over the top of the muzzle, and they lunge the horse with it. And the idea is basically, and this is complete kindergarten version of it, the idea is basically to get the horse traveling, pointing their nose in the direction of travel. In Spain, they use a similar thing. The old style Spanish Cavazos that I'm familiar with was made out of steel. It's something similar to what I use with my circus pole. It's the same basic idea, getting the horse to travel in the direction that their nose is pointing, which is really the precursor of the hackamore that we use now. It's kind of the same idea, getting the horse to travel in the same direction, or to point their nose in the direction that they're traveling. So the Cavazos that we talk about nowadays, those are a whole different deal. The Spanish and the Portuguese Cavazos and the idea behind a hackamore, totally different deal. The ones we talk about nowadays, you see them in Western riding, you see them in English riding, you see them in dressage, you see them in a lot of places. In the English world, with a snaffle bit, they don't use a curb strap or a chin strap, sometimes we call it in Western riding. In Western riding, in the snaffle bit, we use a chin strap, and it goes underneath the chin from ring to ring. What's the whole point of it? You'll hear a lot of people say, well, so you don't pull the snaffle bit through the horse's mouth. When you pull on it, they gape their mouth, and no, that's not really, yeah, it does work for that, but that's not really the point of it, because you're doing everything wrong if that's what the chin strap is doing for you. The horse shouldn't be gaping its mouth. You shouldn't be having to pull that hard, etc., etc., etc. What that chin strap is doing in Western riding is it's really just kind of holding the bit in place. You see the vast majority of Western riders with a snaffle bit, with a chin strap on it, have it way, way, way too loose. It's actually doing nothing. There's no point in having it on there. I've got several snaffle bits where I don't have one on there because by the time I'm using that snaffle bit, I really don't need it. When you're using a chin strap, Western style, with a snaffle bit, what it's doing is it should be relatively snug, and it's kind of holding the snaffle bit in place. In Western riding, almost everybody likes to have that bit kind of low in the horse's mouth, where the horse has to take its tongue in its mouth and pick it up and hold on to that bit. That's a great thing. That's a really good part of snaffle bit training in the Western world. To me, I dang sure don't start them that way. I start them to where they have a chin strap in it, and I have not a wrinkle, but I have darn sure have contact with their cheeks, to where the colt doesn't have to hold the bit himself, to where the bit's held up in there and everything has contact, and that chin strap helps to keep everything where it's supposed to be. So now we go to English riding, where the Cavazos is kind of right off the bat, first thing, right when you first start training on horses. And any English riders watching this, if I'm wrong about any of this, I'm right about all the theories. If I'm wrong about some of the little intricate practices, don't yell at me. I don't really ride English that much anymore. So in English riding, most English riders start with at least one wrinkle. Some go to 2 wrinkles in the cheek, to where that snaffle bit is pulled up pretty darn snug in the horse's mouth, where there's a lot of contact. I start them with a little bit of contact. Most English riders start them with a lot of contact and have it pretty tied up in there. It's still for the same purpose as the way I do it. It's so that the horse doesn't have to pick that snaffle up and hold it and learn how to pack it around right off the bat. They've got it in their mouth. It's the head stall's holding it up there. So they don't usually have a chin strap. They have a Cavazos, and that Cavazos goes around the muzzle and in between the rings. And the Cavazos does the same thing that our curb strap does, or chin strap, in the sense that it kind of holds the bit in place to where it can't get pulled out of bounds, to where the young horse can't figure out what to do about it. It's really just a seat belt, for lack of a better term. That's what we're doing with the Cavazos in the dressage world and in the English world, and that's why we use a chin strap instead in the Western world. So now we fast forward in the horse's education some. Let's stay with the English world and the dressage world, and you see the finished dressage horses that are doing high school maneuvers, and they're doing Spanish riding school kind of stuff, and they've got a Cavazos on. Well, it appears that it is now being used as a mouth shutter. Now, here's where I'm going to step on my ignorance. I know that when you get into the bit and burdoon education of a horse, which is like a finished bridle horse in the Western world, I know that the Cavazos is part of the system. Just like I was talking about with bits in some of these other videos, it's not the mouthpiece or the cheek, it's the mouthpiece and the cheek. It is part of the system. When you get into the bit and burdoon part of the deal, it is the bit and the burdoon and the Cavazos is all part of the system. Now, exactly what the Cavazos does in that system, I don't know. That's where I'm saying I'm stepping on my ignorance a little bit. But what I do know is it's not to keep the horse from gaping its mouth, because I have ridden those horses. I didn't know what I was doing. I was getting coached. But I've ridden horses that were at the Olympics in dressage. And at the time, actually, the horses were older than I was, which was kind of funny for my team. But those horses are not trying to gape their mouths. Those horses are so light and so soft. And it is a matter of flexing your fingers that causes them to maneuver. Those horses are amazing. So it's not tying their mouth shut at that level of dressage. I don't know exactly what it is doing, but it's part of the system. Now, in lower levels of dressage and in maybe less educated hands, less educated horses, things like that, yeah, maybe they're using it as a mouth shutter to basically keep the horse from gaping its mouth. Not basically, totally. keep the horse from gaping its mouth. Yeah, to me that's dumb. That means you haven't spent enough time. You haven't done your work. You're cheating if you're using it that way. So now we go into the Western world with Cavazos mouth shutters. People using them to keep the horse from gaping its mouth. I'm in the same boat. If in the Western world, if you're using a mouth shutter to keep the horse from gaping its mouth, well, you're cheating. That's all there is to it. You can get a lot done in a training situation by keeping them from gaping their mouths, tying their mouth shut, and doing some things. You can make it where they can't escape from that bit. Yeah, you can get some training things done. It's not really my cup of tea, but some people do it that way. But all that aside, this is my main deal against mouth shutters. And I started out with, I was watching the other guy and he was talking about it and it didn't make any sense to me. So this is what does make sense to me. I was riding with a mouth shutter. This was years ago, and I'd seen other guys do it that were better hands than me, so I was doing it too. I was around Benny Guitron and he asked me why I was doing it. I said, well, I'm trying to keep his mouth shut. You know, I can pull on him and he doesn't open his mouth. That way he never gets in the habit of gaping his mouth. And Benny said, on these younger horses, when we're trying to bend them and flex them and frame them into this frame that we want, they at first don't have to have the athletic capability to do what we want. We're pushing them into that frame that we want, and they don't really have the athletic capability. And something has to give. They can't be soft everywhere. Something has to give. And he said, I would rather they open their mouth than braced in the poll. I'd rather they braced in their jaw than braced in their poll, because eventually they will learn to not brace in their mouth. But if they go to bracing in other places, then they'll get it as a habit. And I quit using the mouth shutter after that because it made perfect sense to me. If I'm going to pull on a horse, which you're going to do sometimes when you're training them, and it doesn't matter how soft you want to be or how traditional you want to be or how natural horsemanship you want to be, if you're going to train a horse from zero to finished, you're going to have to pull on them sometimes. And they're going to have to give somewhere. And I would just as soon they gave in their jaw and opened their mouth, because they will learn not to do that, because it's not fun for them, it's not comfortable for them. They will learn not to do that, and they will get a habit of bracing in other places. So I don't tie their mouth shut. That's the simple reason. It has nothing to do with anything else other than I'm giving them an option. I'm giving them a place where they can brace in their jaw if they want to. I can fix that later. And that's all I have to say about mouth shutters.